Okay, welcome to another episode of the Lily and Sam Show. I would like to mention our Facebook page before I get started. It's called Plenty O Viking, and it's a group for Norse paganism and pagan dating and relationships. On it, we provide historical content associated with Norse paganism, Scandinavian history, and some other areas pertinent to the growth and spread of the Norse people. What's a little different about our page is that we also educate on how to have a healthy relationship and how to navigate things in relationships that make them successful, and a space for safe meeting and dating of all types of pagans. So nobody's left out, even though it's Norse pagan based. Any pagans can join and use that to try and meet people or to learn how to be a better partner. Please go check it out. We'd love to have you there, no matter what the status of your love life is. Also, please like and sub our channel to help us grow this little seedling project. As an announcement, I have purchased a better mic, so sound will improve, hopefully. Small strides to make the channel better as I learn to navigate the world of YouTube videos. Bear with me. I'd also like to tell you about a fantastic new business a friend of mine has started. It's called the Cauldron Collective, where magical practices and life skills come together to help you achieve your goals. Their team of mentors can provide you with support and guidance you need to overcome obstacles and create positive change. Discover their services and start your transformation today. I will put a link in the description below. So, for this episode, we're going to do a deep dive into the story of Olga of Kiev. She's the female and original John Wick, or the Cersei Lannister in history. An incredible story about one of my personal heroines in history. I love her. It's hard for me to believe that a movie hasn't been done of a higher caliber on this incredible badass. She is an integral figure in both pagan and Christian lore, and she merits more attention than she's gotten, for sure. I'm taking information from 3 sources to give a full picture of all the intensity that she displays in her long life. As an aside, her entry in the Britannica online site is shorter than that of her husband, who actually never did anything of merit, which I find hilarious and obtuse. Okay, so onward to Olga. Shame on Britannica. Before I head to the source material, I'd like to describe my feelings on Olga. Her story is a love story. It's a romance. Her love for her husband was the epitome of what it can and should be. Many consider her a violent and harsh woman. Those same people separately say they would kill for their children or family, but never do. Those same people also see nothing wrong with the millions of men who've killed for nothing more than a king's order. So I dismiss it out of hand. It is meaningless drivel spouted from the mouths of hypocrites about a time when violence was the way everyone handled their business. Her heart was true, her vengeance severe, and in an era where many did not know love for their mate, she did. She backed it up with action and intelligence. Her mind was cunning. She bested many men with it, and her tactical skills were unmatched. Perhaps she would even rate amongst the best. A great tactician. If anyone even knew who the fuck she was. So let us move to the sources and find out who this brilliant and unique woman was, how she affected the lands she ruled over, and how she finished out her life story in the same fashion as she entered it. A fiery and competent ruler, which without her leadership, Kiev and the Rus might never have been more than a blip on the radar of history. So, I will put my sources down in the description. This one is from, this first one that we're going to go into is from World History Connected. It is strange historical twist. It is a strange historical twist. The first Russian woman to be canonized in the Orthodox Church was a Viking warrior princess who spent much of her life as a pagan. Olga earned her sainthood by becoming the first of the House of Rurik, the dynasty that ruled European Russia and parts of Ukraine and Belarus for more than 7 centuries, to convert to Christianity. But the role of this battle maid in the spread of Christendom to the Eastern Slavs is only part of her remarkable contribution to the history of Eastern Europe. Olga is the only woman for whom we possess significant biographical details in written sources for the Kievan Rus period of Russian history, 860s to 1240. In contrast with Western Europe and the Byzantine Empire, medieval Russian women did not participate in literary culture, aside from the occasional inscription or letter of the type found on birch bark in the excavations of medieval Novgorod. The laws of the period reveal that women enjoyed few legal protections compared with their male peers. Now, I'm going to have to take a minute to disagree on this point. Women in the pagan North enjoyed some of the most protection and freedoms when compared with the laws of other cultures during the same era. There was respect given to those laws, but when written about in modern day, it is frequently overlooked or disregarded. You have a chance to learn about these laws. If you have a chance to learn about these laws, you will see comments like this are inaccurate. Okay, back to the source. Women could inherit property from their parents or husbands, but only in the absence of brothers or sons. If the sons were young, the widow managed the family's estate until the son reached their majority. Olga is, in this way, typical of the free elite women of Kiev. For nearly 2 decades, in 945 to 962, Olga ruled the rapidly expanding kingdom of the Kievan Rus, which received its name from its capital, Kiev, on the middle Dnieper River, as reagent for her son, Svatoslav. And she did so in stunning fashion, despite significant obstacles. Olga assumed power at the time when the realm was shaken by tribal violence and administrative disorder. She bloodily pacified rebellious tribes and replaced tribute-taking with a regular system of taxation. Olga's decision to convert to Eastern Christianity instead of Catholicism was also a fundamental step in the spiritual and political alliance of the Kievan Rus with the Byzantine Orthodox, and would rather than with later Christendom. In short, it took the will and perspicacity of a barbarian widow to begin the transformation of the Rus lands from a loosely knit pagan chieftaincy into a more stable and Christianized or centralized Christian kingdom. Reconstructing Olga's story is a complex matter because there was very little that was written down during her lifetime, when Kievan Rus was as yet a mainly pagan kingdom without literary tradition. Chroniclers may have begun the record of the actions of the dynasty after the official adoption of Christianity a generation after Olga's death, but these early records unfortunately have not survived. So my thoughts on this conversion as a self-ascribed Norse pagan are this. In a time where it was do or die, so to speak, it was an intellectual's only choice to convert. Either you converted willingly and were rewarded with gifts of protection and cohesion, or you didn't and were mercilessly slaughtered. It was kind of a no-brainer, and I refrain from crying cowardice because as a pagan it is easy to accept another god into your pantheon when the reward is so great. Some may disagree. Those are just my own opinions on the matter. And Olga was no coward. Her care for her people was born out of every action she took to continue. To continue the source material. The most important account of Olga's life comes from a source written many generations after Olga's lifetime. The Tale of Bygone Years. You're going to hear that quite a few times. And some of this is going to be repetitive because it's 3 different sources, but they're all using some of the same sources to tell the story. So the Tale of Bygone Years, a chronicle that was completed by the monks Nestor and Sylvester, who lived in the Kievan Caves Monastery, which was supported by the Rurikid princes of Kiev. As Rurikid descendants, the author monks organized the narrative around the role of the ruling family's ancestors in creating the Christian state. Because much of the chronicle covered events that took place many generations prior to its compilation, the authors appear to base the tale on oral accounts, some clearly inspired by legend. The result is a rich and often dramatic history that is reflective of the multi-ethnic traditions, Eastern Slavic, Scandinavian, and Finnic, that made up the culture of the Kievan Rus. Olga's story, as told in the Tale of Bygone Years, is a product of this type of chronicle writing. We are fortunate that the chroniclers fashioned an exciting portrait of Olga, one that can be corroborated occasionally by contemporary sources from Western Europe and Byzantine Empire. So it's interesting to me, as you'll see as we go on, that the areas that are corroborated by additional sources are accepted, but the areas that are not corroborated by additional sources and involve Olga being a badass are not exactly accepted. They're kind of placed in this weird fantasy. Oh, they made that up to make it dramatic and to make her more interesting than she really was. I find that obnoxious personally, but it is what it is. Some people do that. A lot of current day academics downplay the stories and the tales of women being amazing in history still. And so that kind of annoys me sometimes. Anyways, an examination of Olga, therefore, is in effect an exercise in early medieval source criticism. Okay. The power of the Rurikid chieftaincy was based on its ability to control and exploit the natural wealth of European Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine. This territory stretched across 4 latitudinal landscape zones, each amenable to different forms of economic exploitation. From north to south stretched tundra, hunting, gathering, boreal forest and intermediate forest steppe, hunting, gathering, and agriculture, and the steppe, pastoral nomadism. The forest zones were especially rich in fur-bearing animals: pine, marten, fox, sable, squirrel, honey, and wax. The more densely settled regions also supplied slaves. The Volkhov-Lovat, Dnieper, Volga, and Don river systems linked these diverse resource zones. Through this river network, linked by linked by a system of portages, it was possible to travel by boat from northern Europe to the great empires of medieval Western Eurasia and the Byzantine Empire, and the Islamic Caliphate. The furs, honey, wax, and slaves could be exchanged in Constantinople and Baghdad for silks, spices, and most importantly, silver in the form of coins, called dirhams, which were struck in enormous quantities annually in Muslim lands. In the early Middle Ages, there were very few active silver mines in Western and Northern Europe, but the need for this commodity was great due to the expansion of Anglo-Saxon and Carolingian economies. It must have been apparent to many by the 9th century that opportunity for great wealth presented itself to those who could control the Russian river system and its people. The Vikings were Scandinavian farmers, traders, and summer raiders, and the consummate commercial opportunists of the early Middle Ages. And it is they who seized control of Russia's trade routes and supplied Western warlord Rurik Western Europe with Islamic silver for 2 centuries. According to the tale of bygone years, a group of Vikings led them. The chronicler informs that the Slavs and Finns were at war with one another and required a neutral party to bring peace and order to the realm. It is important to note that the author was writing a piece of royal propaganda intended to glorify the dynasty. Okay, so this may be a true enough criticism. However, it is important to note that it did in fact happen. So, it happened. So weird. We are told that in 862, Rurik and his clan arrived in the northwestern Russia and established bases of power in several towns. By 879, Rurik's clan, Oleg, captured Kiev, proclaiming that it would be the mother of Russian cities. Oleg and his successor, Igor, spent their reigns subjugating the tribes along the major river system. Once conquered, each tribe was absorbed into a rudimentary tax collection system in which the Kievan princes extracted tribute in the form of furs, wax, honey, and slaves from the various tribes by means of an annual winter tour called Poliudi, loosely translated as "to the people." The booty was forwarded to Kiev, where it was bundled into large dugout canoes and transported each spring down the Dnieper River to the Black Sea. The commercial flotilla's ultimate destination was Constantinople, the capital of the Byzantine Empire and the most powerful city in Western Eurasia in the 10th century. Of course, the Byzantine emperors recognized the peril of opening the gates of the imperial city to a horde of Vikings, and they needed to be convinced of the benefits of peaceful trade with Kiev. Accordingly, the Vikings from Rus attacked the Byzantine Empire 5 times in less than a century. Most of the campaigns resulted in commercial treaties between Kiev and Constantinople. Provisos in these treaties included restrictions on the number of Rus allowed into the city at one time, 50, and the requirement that the Vikings check their weapons at the gate. Check your weapons at the gate, you badasses. While Olga does not appear to have played a major role in the Kievan politics during this period, she lived at the Kievan court and would have been witness to the phenomena described above. According to the tale of bygone years, Olga joined the Rurikid family when she married Igor in 903. Some dates are kind of weird. They don't exactly line up really well. The source knows little of her early years, but states that she was born in Pskov, a major town near Pepys, on the Estonian-Russian border, in 890. Olga is not mentioned again until 942, when she gave birth to Igor's son, Svatoslav, at the rather mature age of 52. So there's the date thing. I think that's a little weird. It might be kind of messed up, not lining up exactly. It is important to recall that the tale of bygone years was compiled more than a century and a half after Olga's lifetime. Chronological slips are par for the course with medieval authors, and it is likely that some of these dates are erroneous. What is certain is that Olga's life changed suddenly with the violent death of her husband Igor at the hands of one of his subject tribes. In 945, Igor and the men of his retinue, desiring a higher standard of living, extorted an unusually large tribute from the Drevlians, a Slavic tribe living in the marshes and forests south of the Pripyat River, to the northwest of Kiev. Dissatisfied even with the extraordinary amount collected, Igor decided to return back for more, Upon learning of his imminent arrival, the Drevlian leader, Prince Maul, cautioned his men, "If a wolf come among sheep, he will take away the whole flock one by one, unless he be killed. If we do not thus kill him now, he will destroy us all." So little did they know the wolf wasn't Igor, but his loving wife Olga. Igor was then duly ambushed and killed. The actions, and later you'll find out how, it was pretty miserable. A miserable death, I'm sure. Let's see. The actions of the Drevlians were a logical reaction to Igor's initiatives. Maybe. He had already collected the annual tribute. Returning for more tribute so soon violated tradition, and Igor had lost his legitimacy by contract with his tributary subjects. So, a little bit of back history is that the Drevlians had not paid their tribute for many years. So that is why he went back, just as a side note. It doesn't mention that here. It's like he shouldn't have asked for more. The Rurikid family's control over the realm teetered on the brink of collapse. Igor's successor, Hnefatafl, was a mere toddler, necessitating the widow Grand Princess Olga become regent. Immediate action had to be taken against the Drevlians, since they threatened both the realm and the dynasty. Olga's handling of the rebels, known as Olga's Vengeance, constitutes one of the most colorful episodes in Eastern Slavic history. That it does. After laying Igor to rest under a large mound outside the Drevlian capital of Iskarostan, their Prince Maul decided to propose marriage to Olga with the aim of controlling young Hnefatafl. Huge mistake. Olga met the Drevlian embassy outside the gates of Kiev, responding that she was intrigued by the proposal, but wanted to honor the delegation in a public ceremony the next day, to which they would be carried in their boats. Duly flattered, the Drevlians retired to their camp. It is clear from this point that Olga had no intention of marrying Prince Maul. Upon her command, the Kievans spent the night digging a deep ditch in their city. The next day, the Drevlian embassy presented itself in sumptuous dress, demanding that they be carried into town aloft their wooden boats. According to plan, the boats were dumped into the ditch, and the men were buried alive. Olga then sent word to Prince Maul. He doesn't know anything that's happened yet, requesting a company of his best men to accompany her to the Drevlian capital. Unaware of his first embassy's gruesome demise, Prince Maul complied with the wishes of his future bride. When the best men of Drevia arrived in Kiev, Olga invited them to bathe before seeing her. Once they were in the bathhouse, however, it was set on fire. The men burned alive. Olga then set out for the Drevlian capital of Iskarostan. As she approached the gates of the city, the grieving widow asked to hold a funeral feast at Igor's burial mound. Still oblivious to the fate of the embassies sent to Kiev, the Drevlians happily joined her in the great feast, at which copious amounts of adult beverages were consumed. The Drevlians... When full inebriation ensued, Olga and her army slaughtered more than 5,000 drunk Drevlians, but Olga's plan had not yet reached full execution. The next year she invaded the land of Drevia. In a final battle, she laid siege to Iskarostan. After a year, the Drevlians offered to pay tribute, but they did not have any honey or furs on hand, so what could they offer her? Olga requested 3 pigeons and 3 sparrows from each household. Upon their receipt, her men attached rags dipped in sulfur to the feet of each bird. When the birds returned to their nest, they lit the city on fire, and the Drevlians perished in their homes. Olga's vengeance was now complete. How are we to understand this seemingly fantastic account? Early medieval tales of grieving widows on the warpath should not be taken at face value. I got a problem with this. Since they were employed as a literary device. So when it's a story about a man doing something warlike, nobody ever says this kind of crap. When it's a woman, it's like, oh, that was embellished. That really didn't happen that way. Whatever. So I have a problem with that. It's a double standard in academia that I see a lot every time I read these articles, and it just really is very irritating to see it over and over and over again. Since they were employed as a literary device intended both to entertain and, in the case of Olga, to demonstrate a stark moral makeover brought on by her soon-to-follow conversion to Christianity. With the description of the pagan Olga's brutality, the monk authors thus demonstrated the miraculous transformative powers of conversion, or the fact that she had gotten her revenge and was done. Could be that. Maybe. I don't know. Much as Buddhist writers attributed brutal acts of oppression to the Indian Emperor Ashoka prior to his conversion and subsequent valorization of ahimsa, or nonviolence. This does not mean, however, that the story in either or both cases is pure fantasy. Independent corroboration of Igor's assassination is found in the 10th century Byzantine source written by Leo the Deacon, who related that Igor was captured by them, tied to tree trunks, and torn in two. It is certain that military retribution followed. Yeah, it is certain. So, and Olga was in charge. The tale of Olga's vengeance, however, plays another role as a literary allegory reenacting a Scandinavian pagan mortuary ritual. First, the burying alive of the Drevlian embassy in their boats, the Viking practice of ship burial, in which the deceased was often interred in a boat with a ritual sacrifice. Second, the burning of the next embassy in the bathhouse reenacts a ritual cleansing by fire. Third, the slaying by Olga's army of 5,000 of the intoxicated enemy represents a funeral feast and an attendant sacrifice. It is known that Scandinavian widows of elite warriors practiced sati. But this was not an option for Olga, whose son was too young to rule. Given the circumstance, it was important for the chronicle authors to demonstrate that Olga was both a dutiful wife and cunning military leader, attributes that were highlighted in the story. This seems to imply that the story of what Olga did was false, which is yet another way to discount her. I'm not a fan, and I see this repeated with virtually every story in which a woman rises to power. Women do not rise to power, to a position of power, by sitting on their duff. I believe the story to be true. Cunning is the nature of women. It is how we win against insurmountable odds. Her story is also unique. These were not normal male tactics in war. You never see this kind of dismissal when an academic is talking about a male tactician, so why should we see this when speaking of a female? Just my 2 cents after spending a lifetime of studying historical events. She was the ruler. If she didn't do these things, then how did she bring the Drevlians back under submission? Okay, back to the source. Resubjugating the Drevlians was only a partial measure towards securing the Rurikid position in the realm. The system that had been in place for several decades, the Poliudi, did not bring in sufficient revenue to support the Kievan princes and their followers. In attempting to collect a secondary tribute soon after an unusually high annual payment, Igor violated tradition and put himself in a dangerous position, which led to his murder. The success of the Poliudi depended on mutual trust, cooperation from tribal leaders, and tribal custom. Olga replaced this essentially ad hoc practice with a series of trading stations, pagost, staffed by her own officials, who would levy a standard tax on the subject tribes. Like the earlier tribute, the tax was still paid in the resources abundant in each region, furs, honey, wax, but now the state could depend on receiving set amounts. Additionally, the use of royal officials in the collection process freed the ruler to engage in other matters and protected him or her from the wrath of angry taxpayers, which is good. The permanent trading post also appeared to have played a role in expanding the territory of the Kievan Rus, especially to the north, from which royal officials could assert the suzerainty of Kiev in areas heretofore dominated by tribal chiefdoms. As a further administrative refinement, Olga organized the minting of coins, and the first Rurikid rulers to do so, an action that helped facilitate trade, exchange, and the payment of taxes to the princely treasury. Yet another brilliant move on Olga's part, a move which cannot be denied by modern academics due to its multiple source documentation. These measures were something that many female rulers would make in order to take control over taxes and make them safer and more fairly laid out. Created an environment that was less stressful for the population and less likely to cause internal strife or rebellion. At the very least, if you know what you will have to pay, you can prepare for it. Other rulers that made such measures were Queen Elizabeth and Queen Catherine. Another figure of note that had an effect on the taxation of her people was Lady Godiva, who rode through the city naked on a horse to get her obstinate husband to lower taxes for her people. This is where we get the term peeping Tom, because the townspeople agreed not to look upon her during her ride, but a man named Tom did, hence peeping Tom. What a total douche. Anyways, I digress. On with our story. In 954 or 955, Olga traveled to Constantinople, where she took the historically momentous step as the first Rurikid to convert to Christianity. According to the story as told by the Tale of Bygone Years, the Byzantine Emperor Constantine was so struck by the Kievan Grand Princess' beauty and intellect that he remarked she was worthy to reign with him in his city. Not something the ruler of an entire Christian empire says to someone who is not cunning enough to bring the Drevlians into submission, I'd proffer. And here is yet another of Olga's cunning tricks. So Constantine wants to marry Olga, but she's not so keen on the idea. Olga replied that this was not possible since she was pagan, and that if he desired to baptize her, he should perform this function himself. Key. Otherwise, she was unwilling to accept baptism. The baptism was officiated by the patriarch, the official head of the church, and the emperor served as Olga's godfather. Following the christening, the emperor reminded Olga of his marriage proposal. Olga thought it over, pretty sure she had already thought it over, and responded, "How can you marry me after yourself baptizing me and calling me your daughter? For among Christians that is unlawful, as you yourself must know." The emperor then exclaimed, "Olga, you had outwitted me," as she tends to do with everyone. She returned to Kiev with a blessing from the patriarch and rich gifts from the emperor, including gold, silks, silver, and vases. Olga's conversion was a bold move because she now belonged to a small religious minority. The overwhelming majority of the population of Kievan Rus practiced a variety of religions that can loosely be characterized as paganism. The Slavs, for example, venerated a series of gods connected with fertility, Dazbog, the sky, Strybog, fertility, Dazbog, the sky, Strybog, and cattle, Velis. The Finns practiced shamanism, which involved the communication with animal spirits through a shaman. Their main god appears to have been a fertility goddess called Makash. Finally, the warrior elite, led by the Rurikid clan, followed the cult of Perun, god of lightning, who resembled closely the Viking god Thor. By the time of Olga's conversion, in the mid-10th century, at least a small part of the population was Christian, judging from a Byzantine Rus commercial treaty dated 944 that mentions Christian Rus. Among the warrior class, however, the number of Christians was certainly small. As its leader, the Rurikid family could ill afford to alienate the constant influx of pagan warriors from Scandinavia by a forced conversion to Christianity. Why would Olga potentially undermine the hard-won stability of the realm by making what must have been a controversial move to abandon the religion of her ancestors and most important adherents? The answer rests in a broader pattern of decision-making designed to consolidate Rurikid authority domestically and strengthen Kiev's position in relation to its much more powerful neighbor, the Byzantine Empire. With her installation of appointed officials and more formalized tax collection, formalized tax collection. How the tax, which was largely paid in the form of honey, wax, or furs, was converted into cash or luxuries for the court, depended largely on Kiev maintaining positive relations with the Byzantine Empire. Since the items collected were bound for markets in Constantinople, commercial relations with the emperor, however, were far from equal, since from the Byzantine perspective, the Kievan merchants were dangerous pagan idolaters. The Byzantines prohibited the merchants from overwintering in Dnieper estuary and placed limits on the amount of silks they could purchase in Constantinople. As mentioned above, Kiev's rulers resorted to military force multiple times in the first half of the 10th century to garner commercial treaties with the empire. But commercial advantages were not the only driving force in Olga's path to conversion. In the 9th century, Kiev's Slavic neighbors, Moravia and Bulgaria, had already adopted Christianity as their official state religion. And in 966, Poland would follow. Even the Viking kingdom of Denmark was adopting the new religion. As a pagan holdout, Kiev would find itself increasingly isolated from the diplomatic circles of Christian Europe. Without doubt, Olga also understood that having the entire Kievan realm follow a single religion under the auspices of a church controlled by the state, such as that which existed in the Byzantine Empire, would encourage centralization of the kingdom. So, as a pagan, I feel a sadness when it comes to conversion, but I do understand her reasons and rationale. It was a force of power that would benefit her people and kingdom to convert. I think her decision was based on love for her people and the desire to be ahead of the rising powers, to align with structure and better organization. It was a logical path, but it does strike a chord in my pagan heart. Establishing a state church in 10th century Europe was a perilous exercise. Christianity was divided into two rival institutions, the Catholic Church, centered in Rome, and the Orthodox Church in Constantinople, and each was controlled by a powerful state. The Holy Roman Emperor in Germany dominated the Roman papacy, and the Byzantine Emperor, the Patriarch, in Constantinople, while the Church Schism, which was the actual break between the East and West, would not occur until 1054. The 9th and 10th centuries witnessed an intense period of rivalry between the two, in which they sought to create spheres of influence through the conversion of the remaining pagan peoples in Europe. This was done by sending missionaries to non-Christian areas or offering pagan rulers incentives, such as the great honor of marrying one of the emperor's relatives. The converts would then receive priests, religious books, and a church hierarch. Most often, the newly founded state church institutions would remain under the control of the Patriarch in Constantinople or the Pope in Rome, providing the emperor's opportunity to meddle in the local state affairs of the new converts, thus exercise considerable religious and secular influence. Olga appears to have been aware of the potential threat to Kievan autonomy during her visit to Constantinople. Her hesitation is evidenced by her clever refusal. I love the refusal. Oh, you're my dad. You're my godfather. You called me daughter. We can't get married. Brilliant. Olga appears to... Oh, yes, here we go. A clever refusal of the Byzantine emperor's proposal of marriage. In this way, Olga averted Byzantine conquest of Kiev through marriage. The implication is clear, although not explicitly stated, that Olga sought specific demands such as enhanced commercial privileges and perhaps a church in Kiev independent of Constantinople, one that would be autocephalous, with its own head. That's what that means. The failure of her talks with the emperor became clear by the fall of 959, when Olga sent a request to the Byzantine emperor's arch-nemesis, Emperor Otto I, the secular protector of the papacy. The German chronicler Adalbert records that Olga asked for the ordination of a bishop and priests for her people. Adalbert made the journey to Kiev, but later abandoned the mission because his efforts for those things on account of which he had been sent had produced negligible results. Olga's goal of founding a church institution in Kiev would not be realized until the reign of her grandson, Vladimir. Her failure, however, likely helped preserve Kiev's autonomy from Germany and Byzantium, because both of these states were enormously powerful in the 950s and 960s. And a Kievan church controlled by either of them might well have proved detrimental for the future strength of the realm. It also appears that Kiev's warrior elite were resistant to the new faith, as seen through Olga's efforts to convert her son, Svatoslav. "My son, I have learned to know God, and am glad for it. If you know this, you will rejoice." To which Svatoslav replied, "How shall I alone accept another faith? My followers will laugh at me." And that was kind of the general consensus. They thought that the Jesus God was funny and weak. In 962, Svatoslav came of age and began to rule in Kiev. Like his father, the young ruler was a warrior who crushed the Khazar state in the lower Don Volga region and tried to expand Rus' territory to Bulgaria in the lower Danube, which brought him into conflict with the Byzantine emperor. Olga ruled Kiev in her son's long absences, taking care of his young sons, Yaropolk, Oleg, and Vladimir. In 968, Sviatoslav's warmongering against the empire provoked an all-out attack on Kiev by the Byzantine allies, the Turkic Pechenegs. The siege that ensued was a lengthy one, and the Kievan people, led by Olga, endured significant hardship, while Svatoslav remained in Preslav, Bulgaria. The now elderly Olga had to escape across the Dnieper River by boat with her grandchildren in tow. A seemingly contrite Svatoslav then returned to Kiev and drove the Pecheneg army away. Olga died soon after of old age, but not before she arranged for herself a funeral in the Christian rite officiated by a priest. She wanted neither a burial mound nor a funeral feast, which were pagan traditions. The 2 decades after Olga's death were turbulent ones for her son and grandsons. In 972, Svatoslav, having continued his wars against the Byzantine Empire, was killed by the Pechenegs, who celebrated their victory by making a gilded drinking cup from his skull. Harsh. You think Olga was harsh. That's pretty harsh. Drink from the skull of your enemies. Sviatoslav's son, Yaropolk, Oleg, and Vladimir fought a long civil war, which resulted in the deaths of the first two. and the ascension of Vladimir as the sole ruler over Kiev. A devout pagan standing in relation to the Byzantine Empire in the late 10th century, when the emperor was in the throes of a civil war and needed troops to support his campaign in the Crimea. In exchange for military assistance, Vladimir was offered in marriage the hand of the Byzantine emperor's sister, a great honor offered to very few foreigners. It seemed of little consequence to the emperor that Vladimir already had 3 wives and 300 concubines. Why do you need 300 concubines? Come on, guys. Come on, guys. You don't need that many concubines. I mean, that's 1 a day. I guess that's the goal. 1 a day, a different one every day. The emperor also gave Vladimir great latitude in establishing a state church in Kiev, again because he needed the Kievan army to help stave off rebellion. Vladimir's conversion to Orthodox Christianity in 988 and 989, and its adoption as the Kievan realm's official religion no doubt swept clean the Grand Prince's sins as a misguided pagan. Yes, congrats. It's all washed away. The major incentive for Vladimir's baptism was certainly a diplomatic and political one, but we cannot overlook his grandmother Olga's influence during his formative years in the 960s. Her family revered Olga, and while she failed to persuade her son and grandsons to convert during her lifetime, the memory of her devotion to the Orthodoxy in later life played a not insignificant role in the family's eventual turn to the Byzantine Christianity. Centuries later, Olga's deep piety was repeatedly mentioned by medieval authors, who described her as radiant among infidels like a pearl in the dung, the sainted Olga, who always sought the wisdom of God. And although she was a woman in body, she possessed a man's courage. That's true. She did. The exact date of her canonization by Russian Orthodox Church is unknown, but it followed closely upon the elevation to sainthood of Vladimir in the late 13th century, making Olga the only woman to be included in this first group of homegrown Russian saints. Okay, so that's it for our first source. I am going to stop here, and I will put that source in the description and also a link to the Cauldron Collective. In order to see some differing perspectives in our next video, we'll move on to themedievalreporter.com. They have a really great article on Olga there, so that'll be the next video. Thank you so much. Please like, share, help us grow this channel. I'm getting better every day, more relaxed. I think it'll be good, and so it will definitely help if you like and share and make a comment. Yeah, so thank you so much. Have a great day.